obligation to rebuild and reinforce the erosion of trust with the employee base. I can feel the head nods right now.
People, for whatever reason, are walking spineless without a backbone, not willing to voice opposition to the power structure. A headline came across and said, AI, the layoff scapegoat. Why is artificial intelligence the scapegoat for downsizing, resizing, right-sizing, straight laying off, firing individuals when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way? You might say Ngoma costs more than other data annotation solutions. And as an HR professional, I would say, but what's the risk of using those other solutions?
Hey, what's going on? And thank you for tuning into another episode of Joey's HR Lounge. This is the place where HR professionals can relax, learn a little bit, have fun, and be in community with one another. And my guest for this episode needs no introduction, but as a dear, dear friend, I'm always going to be a hype man and cheerleader of Torin Ellis, founder of Ngoma. We are going to talk all things Ngoma today on the show, as well as wherever he wants to take the pod. But without further ado, Torin, welcome to the show, my friend.
Happy New Year. You pronounced it right. So many people have asked me, is the G silent? And absolutely the G is silent. I actually, Joey, may go out and save or try to save an alternative spelling to Ngoma. And let me just share with you real quickly. Every time I do something, I do it with a great deal of intention and thought. And Ngoma, it means drumbeat in Swahili. And I believe that people are the drumbeat of every organization. So hence, launching a new endeavor, excited about what 2026 holds. And I'm happy to be here with you on today.
Man, everything you do, Torin, you do it with full force and you do it with your whole heart. And I have no doubt that the trajectory of Ngoma is a good one. And as far as the pronunciation, if you know, you know. If you're culturally hip, you know. So super glad you're here. Every guest that we have on the show, I always ask their hot take. What's their hot take of the current state of HR? And your take was obligation to rebuild and reinforce the erosion of trust with the employee base. Let's start there because I can feel the head nods right now. I can see the dap, the handshakes, the agreements, the clock it that folks do about this erosion of trust. For there to be an erosion, there has to have been a shift that happened. What does Torin think caused the erosion of trust in the workplace?
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to use this in a bit of a universal definition or position. I think the erosion is when institutions, when people, and when systems defer more to the power structure. They defer more to the shareholder versus the stakeholder, and I believe that that's true, Joey, in any sandbox, we'll call it, whether it be the corporate corridor, whether it be inside of community, religious institutions, inside of our political arena. That erosion of trust is because people, for whatever reason, are walking spineless without a backbone, not willing to voice opposition to the power structure. And for me, you know, what we've seen, and it's not just me, but what we've seen over the years is that companies have deferred to their shareholders versus their stakeholders. I will tell you, you know, moments before we recorded this particular episode, a headline came across and said, AI, the layoff scapegoat.
Mm-hmm. Saw that. Yep.
You saw that? So, I mean, it's just, and so why is that? Why is artificial intelligence the scapegoat for individuals making a decision around downsizing, resizing, right sizing, straight laying off, firing individuals when it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. And so I just believe that the final thing that I'll say to button it up is that HR, unfortunately, has that responsibility of rebuilding trust in organizations. And it's not a sole responsibility. I just don't want them to feel absent of their responsibility.
Yeah, we all have to hold our hand on the net, so to speak, in order to lift that up and make it happen. So that is a true hot take, and I want to spend a lot of time on Noma, but we may circle back on that topic. But what's the origin story of Noma? And for those who are new to you, Torn, which I can't imagine at this point, anyone in HR space has not heard of you and seen your brilliance on display. But what's the origin story of Noma, and what is it?
First of all, Noma focuses on the contextual, lived, and vocal experience of people from the disability community. We want to use that community in a collaborative way to help train AI data. And truth of the matter is that AI data fails disproportionately on disabled, marginalized, and non-normative populations. To answer your question around the origin, for me, artificial intelligence began to hit my radar right around 2018, 2019. And so I share this because there were a number of podcasts and recordings, presentations that I would do, Zooms, webinars, and I would always refer to this one particular report. And it was the piece that really was salient and caught and held my attention. And the report was titled Discriminating Systems of AI by the AI Now Institute. Came out, I believe, in March of 2019. It was Discriminating Systems of Artificial Intelligence by the AI Now Institute. And it listed all of the reasons why we were headed down a bad path because of our exclusion of voices from the disabled community, marginalized, underrepresented communities, non-normative populations. And so fast forward from 2019, I intermittently would weave something around AI into the emotional delivery and presentations that I would do. But I wasn't a staunch advocate. I was, of course, embedded deeply in diversity and inclusion work. January of last year, I released a report, Reducing Bias in HR Using Artificial Intelligence. And the reason I did the report that way is because I wanted HR people to come off of the sideline and find a way to get curious and creative in how they explored and ultimately decided on and deployed AI solutions in their organization. It wasn't a mass judgment, if you will. It was simply from moving through various conferences and events and different interactions. Folks were sitting heavily on the sideline, not sure if they should embrace AI in their organization. So you got 2019 with the report, hop skipping through 2024. And then, of course, you have the just hyperbolic decapitation. That's the word I'm looking for. Decapitation of diversity and inclusion last year. And so I really had to honestly sit with myself and decide, Joey, what is it that I wanted to do going forward? I'm not an ambulance chaser. I'm not a person who does things because it's the in thing to do or it's a fad. When I do and start a business, you know, whatever that has been over the last 28 years of my entrepreneurial journey, it is always, as I said in the beginning, been done with intention and with thought. And it took me some months. Noma has been in and on the radar, but Noma 2 years ago was different than it is today. And so what you see today is an outgrowth of my disappointment in what we experienced last year and better positioning so that I can have critical impact and value in the years to come.
Torin reminds me of the quote, and I don't know where it attributes, but I've heard it so many times throughout the years where it says, they thought they buried us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. And I just know that the seeds of Noma, as they continue to be nourished and develop and grow, will be a answer and a response to the individuals in the disabled and neurodiverse community that want these sorts of opportunities. I can think of, you'd mentioned training AI systems. So um, if I'm like going down the wrong rabbit trail, feel free to rein me in. But there is so much data that exists in the world right now. There's so much newness and creativity and things that can be done. In the push of a button, you could probably write a 200,000 word thesis on the topic of air. I don't know, but there's just so much out there that AI can do. Who's training it to do it the right way and to have the right representation, and to make sure that bias is eliminated in its responses. And so there's a great opportunity because every new creator of an LLM, every new creator of an agentic AI tool, as much as they should run their processes and outcomes through the lens of compliance and legal, it should also be with respect to um, the accommodations that should be set forth for those who would engage with it. So um, there's a lot of work to be done, my friend. A lot of work to be done.
So look at it this way, Joey. AI trust is a data problem before it becomes a model problem.
Yeah.
Well before it becomes any of the models that we are pulling from, whether we're using any of the GPTs, whether we are using internal data, the trust happens well before we deploy any of those systems. And where Noma sits is we want to be involved in the upstream of the data. We want to be involved in how it's being assessed. We want to be involved in determining its provenance. We want to be involved in the ability to share with a client, here's how your data was scored. Here's the journey that your data took through it being scored. Here are the voices or the lived experiences or the contextual layers that it went through before it was scored. And so we
Hmm.
really, really look at and believe, that AI trust is a data problem before it becomes a LLM or a solution problem. And as I said to you a moment ago, when you design for those marginalized communities, when you design for the disabled community, and when you design for those non-normative populations, you're designing for the gaps. You're not designing for the average. Yet, if you design for the gap, you make the average better. And so we are absolutely focused on making sure that we address those individuals that may suffer, or, and when I use the word suffer, companies, decision makers that are trying to avert legal issues and challenges, reputational issues and challenges. And Joey, we want to make sure that we are helping those entities and organizations that are trying to make sure that they are on the right side of that regulatory exposure.
Well, let's take that a little bit further. Now, you have decades of experience and partnership within the HR and talent acquisition communities. Can you help make this need plain for maybe the HR professional who doesn't think they come across as many disabled or neurodiverse applicants or employees as they think they do? Help make it plain why this work is an important, necessary next step for bringing everybody along in the digital transformation that we're all in.
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest ways to look at it is corporate America has traditionally taken plausible deniability position. And what I mean by that, Joey, is they often don't want to know that you, Joey, may have a child with a disability. They more often have not found out whether or not you, Joey, yourself have different dimensions of diversity. They tend to categorize you as heterosexual, cisgender, male, African American, live in Maryland. That's typically all they want to know about who you are. And so what I know is that if that historically has been the posture that most organizations have had, we know through data, we know through research that they are not asking the questions even of their LLMs or the HR tech vendors that are coming into their organization. I can go back to the report that we did last year in reducing bias in HR using artificial intelligence, which was sponsored by Plum. One of the questions that we asked in talking to, I think it was 1,000 HR professionals. I can't remember now, but one of the questions that we asked was, did you ask of your HR tech vendor their considerations around diversity and inclusion in designing their solution?
Mm,
It was nearly 100% unanimous. No, we did not.
mm.
So
Wow.
all I can tell you is that inside of every single organization are a number of different dimensions. And what we are proposing is that we are evaluating and assessing data and making the course corrections necessary so that the data that is being piped into the organization or being recirculated and used in the organization, that those decisions are accounting for, again, the gaps as well as the averages. And I believe that that is absolutely where most organizations are going to be. They may not necessarily feel they need to be there today, but I can assure you, with litigation and pending development, I'm not all negative, but with litigation, with advancements in the technology, being able to become, what's the word that I'm looking for, auditable is
Mhm.
going to be non optional.
While we're recording this episode, the World Economic Forum annual meeting is happening.
Okay.
And um, on LinkedIn today, I just shared a video of like what I would talk about at the World Economic Forum if I was invited to talk about future of work, upskilling, jobs, so on and so forth. I want to, and I know this is not pressure on you because you think about this all the time. But if you think about the world of work that you would like to see us build between now and 2023, what does that look like? Thinking about technology, thinking about people, thinking about that erosion of trust. If Torin could engineer the pathway of the future work, what would you build?
I would build work in a way that allows Joey and every other employee to create their AI surrogate. That's what I would do.
You
Um,
can't just full stop there. We gotta go deeper.
Yeah, and the reason I would do that is because I firmly believe. Listen, the technology is the train is moving extremely fast, and there's no way for us to stop it. For all of us at this particular point, either you're on the train, you're at a stop, and in many ways, some people are in between stops trying to grab a rail and catch it while it's moving down the track. And whatever that scenario looks like for you, you at some point are going to be on this journey. At some point on this journey, that train is going to displace that employee. And I think that we owe it to our employee base, going back to our stakeholder. I think that we owe it to them that if we're not going to create a conversation around universal basic income, that we are creating a conversation around how do I maintain my own personal economy. And
Mhm.
so if there is this potential for me to be displaced by an agent, then I should have some say in the creation of that agent and that we have some degree of shared responsibility. And so in the future, Joey, if organization says, Joey, we want to decrease your hours from where it is by 20%, but we'll continue to pay you at 80% of your pay because your work is not only continuing to be done, but it's being done at the same rate and quality in which you were doing it, but it's just being done in an uninterrupted fashion because we have an agent that is doing that. I believe the solution is that each employee should be able to create their own agent surrogate, and that relationship should be what allows them to protect their personal autonomy. What I've been saying on stages since 2024 is pretend we cannot pretend that this is the massive potential of displacement is a reality. And so for us to ignore it and or not have the conversation, I see that as being irresponsible.
No, that's definitely an interesting take there, and I think it lends itself to a conversation around your labor being its own instance of intellectual property. You talk about having a surrogate of yourself, so that surrogate's gonna attempt to know like you, think like you, do like you, and because it's like you, definitely commercializing that and getting compensated for it is definitely a good way to go.
But just stay there just for a second. You
Yeah,
remember years ago, Tim Ferriss and the 4 hour work week? You
yep,
remember the hype around the 4 hour work week?
yep.
And so why not while many didn't benefit from a 4 hour work week because it just wasn't possible, they weren't entrepreneurs, their organization didn't see the value in giving them some, elusive definition of work life balance. I believe that we now are sitting at a point where the technology is in place, the infrastructure is in place, the decision making strategic capability, they're in place, and I think that we can have a more honest conversation around work life balance. It doesn't need to be a conversation of displacement. Let's have one of work life balance. It may not be you making the same amount of money, but you shouldn't find yourself wrestling with layoff AI as the layoff scapegoat. You shouldn't find yourself competing with 12 people in a board or a PE firm that wants, a higher EBITDA. And so they say come into an organization and let's slash 90% of the workforce. It just shouldn't be one of those conversations. Or let me say it in a different way. It doesn't have to be one of those conversations.
A helpful exercise I go through when I'm thinking about public speaking is to think about all of the perspectives in this conversation or whatever it is I'm going on stage to talk about. L- let's let's have a conversation around the HR professional who may feel trapped in the middle. The one who says, our employees deserve fair, equitable wages, and the CEO or the board is saying we need to drive towards these goals with greater profitability. Um, if if you envision a world where HR gets more and more uncomfortable because the pressure is on them, what what advice or what motivation or what real talk would you give to the HR pro who uh, may be an advocate for the guy in finance or marketing, but then also they may be having to be an advocate for the guy or gal on their team. What do you say to them? Because that's the conversation that we're in right now, not only in this podcast, but just the world around us of having to advocate for the value of humanity in the workplace.
Yeah, so again, going back to the report that we did and the way that I used to consult, the way that I speak, the way that I show up, I don't want people to feel like they don't deserve to be at a table. And so for an HR professional, when you are looking at let's just say artificial intelligence deployment, new technology systems, your decisions should impact HR tech that's inside of the organization. That tech might impact scheduling. It might impact productivity. It may play some role in the hiring process. It may be inside of the performance systems. As an HR professional, I believe that you should be at the table when any of those HR tech, workforce, labor planning, technical solutions are being made. And so if you want to change how people perceive you at the table, let's just say that you were talking about Ngoma, for instance, Joey. I'm going to be selfish in this case.
Go for it.
And so if you were talking about Ngoma, you might say, or you might come up against an individual who says, well, Ngoma costs more than other data annotation solutions. And as an HR professional, I would say, but what's the risk of using those other solutions? There is an inherent risk for us chasing the low cost provider. I think about content moderation days back in the day, Twitter and Facebook and some of the other social media platforms. They had these content moderation folks, and there are a stream of articles that talk about how these individuals were paid, in a very ugly way, if you will. How these individuals were feeling like they were in workplace environments that were toxic, that were unhealthy. They were being forced to moderate sexually explicit, pornographic, violent, just all types of content being paid. I'll use pennies on the dollar. So as an HR professional, do you want to talk about something that is cost related, or do you want to focus on the risk? Do you want to, as an HR professional, focus on the speed in which your previous data annotation provider provided you, or do you want to lean more into where Ngoma is when we want to stand on giving you solutions, reporting that is auditable? I mean, like it's compliant ready. You can take it to court. Do you want to focus on that vendor that is highly sensitive to accuracy? Or do you want to work with someone like Ngoma who is sensitive to accuracy as well as downstream liability? I am saying to you, Joey, that as an HR professional, you've got to change the quality of your conversation. You've got to lift the quality of your conversation. And I'm not suggesting that they haven't done that, but if you haven't, I would say that now is a really good time. If you want to be seen as providing value in the organization, you've got to make sure that you are approaching conversations in a very different way, which is the reason why I was so incredibly frustrated last year with organizations like SHRM, our political leaders. I was frustrated with corporate leaders that operated without a spine and without a backbone, that were unwilling to talk about the positive presence and power and reformation of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging done in a positive way. And so I just simply suggest that as an HR professional, you might find or feel like you are caught in between the shareholder and the stakeholder. But I believe if you exude the type of conviction and confidence and value in your conversation, that you can sway both sides to understand why you take the position that you take.
Wise words, wise words. I always look at HR's role as the delegate or the diplomat, in the sense that you should be in HR because you want to see the greatest good done for all parties that are represented in an agreement or a disagreement. And so being able to use that emotional intelligence to elevate the conversation is definitely a practical takeaway for the times that we're living in. And speaking of the times that we're living in, you'd mentioned the last year and how challenging it has been for the stripping away of DEI. What are some of the either intended or unintended consequences do you think we're seeing now because that important work has not been prioritized or has been shifted or rebranded? Is there anything that you're seeing, or is there anything that you want to talk about on the show of like, this is why we should have kept down the path we're going because we're seeing fill in the blank.
Yeah, I mean, again, Joey, I'm not going to make it a political show, but what
Sure.
I am seeing, let's just stay with what I am seeing. What I am seeing is an administration that is creating a position. They are exerting their will in ways that I believe are dangerous and not good for the corporate corridor. What I see is an administration that is doing the things that it is doing, and we have corporate leaders that are silent and not standing up in the face of what it is that we are experiencing. And so I just feel like what we're going to see as it relates specifically to diversity and inclusion, if you'd like to throw in the geopolitical considerations, if you want to throw in the layer of the economic tariffs and its impact on businesses and innovation and movement of headcount and human resources, and we could probably go a couple of layers deep. I just see us as being in a position where we're going to have to do a lot of cleanup in the years ahead. And I don't know what that cleanup is going to look like, but I know that we are going to find ourselves cleaning up a bit more than necessary. When you are wrestling in an organization around stripping language from your website because you are afraid of losing contracts, when you are wrestling with whether or not to provide certain types of training because you are fearful that you are going to lose relationships or access to particular parties, spaces, and places, that's just not a great way for us to be in business. That's not what I see as conscious capitalism. But I'm a fan of capitalism. I just think that we can be conscious in how we approach it. And we can do that in a word that you used earlier in the recording, humanity. We can do it in a humanistic way. We can have both. It doesn't have to be an either or proposition. And so when I look back over what we experienced last year and what I believe we are going to continue to experience for several years, it's a bit problematic. And I feel like we need people that are just willing to say enough happens to be enough, and we are not going to stand for it. And if that means that we are going to lose a bit, then I think that everyone needs to look at how we reshuffle the deck, but that we are willing to be take a position that is good for our, again, stakeholders as well as our shareholders. And in the long run, I believe that our shareholders will ultimately win as well.
Well, let me just say, if I have my way, Torin Ellis for president, 2028, my friends. I've always appreciated and respected your vision for the future, your vision for reality, and your fearlessness in shaking things up. And as John Lewis would say, doing some good trouble. And so definitely enjoy having you on this platform. Thank you for joining my HR Lounge. How can people follow along with your work, with the things you're doing with Ngoma, and where might you send them if they want to catch your speaking engagements or work on display throughout the rest of the year?
Yeah, so Joy, what I will say to you is, first of all, thank you for for having me as one of the first voices that kick off the year of 2026. I believe it's going to be a year of incredible promise. What folks need to know is that I'm looking for organizations and to work with clients that are in accessibility and assistive technologies, that are in the education or the ed tech space, workforce planning space. I'm looking for organizations that are in health and healthcare and life sciences, that are in financial services. And where you can find us is at Ngoma.io. That's N as in Nancy, G as in greatness, O, M as in Mary, A as in accessibility. Ngoma, Ngoma.io. Ngoma.io. And of course, you can find me across all the social media at Torin Ellis.
All right, man. It's been a pleasure. And audience, thank you for tuning in to the show. Make sure you are subscribed to us on wherever you're listening to this podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, And make sure you join our community where we have a safe space for us to learn, grow, and be challenged together over at joeyshrlounge.com. So without further ado, I'll catch y'all next episode as well as in the community. See you later.